Now I deem it my pleasure to introduce Professor Govind Chakrapani, Vice Chancellor of Berhampur University. He is a distinguished environmental geoscientist. He earned his MSc in Applied Geology from IIT Bombay and MPhil as well as PhD degree from JNU, New Delhi. Professor Chakrapani began his teaching career in the Department of Earth Science, IIT Roorkee, in 1996. Professor Chakrapani was a research scientist at the University of Delaware, USA, and a CSIR pool scientist at JNU and IIT Bombay. He worked as a faculty and researcher in numerous universities in US, France, Germany, Taiwan, Sweden, and China, and also visited several countries for research work and invited lecture. Professor Chakrapani has made enormous contribution in the field of environmental earth science, surface and groundwater research, environmental impact assessment, biogeochemistry, and chemical sedimentology. He has successfully completed several national and international projects and consultancy, supervised as many as 14 PhD students, published more than 75 research papers in reputed journals. In recognition of his research, he was conferred with National Mineral Geoscience Award by the Government of India in the year 2015. Professor Chakrapani was elected, 2005, Professor Chakrapani was elected a fellow of the National Academy of Sciences, India. He served as a chairman of Environmental Assessment Committee, Government of India, and member of Science and Engineering Research Board, SERB. Professor Chakrapani was the organizing chairman of the prestigious Graduate Aptitude Test in Engineering, what we call GATE 2017. It is indeed an honor for us to have so distinguished an academician as Professor Chakrapani with us now. So with great pleasure, I would like to invite Professor Chakrapani to deliver his lecture. Professor Chakrapani, it's your time.
Yeah.
The Google Meet platform is yours. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you very much for selling the Google Meet to me now. Thank you, Professor Bera. Welcome, everybody. Special thanks to Sambalpur University and Sambalpur Basingo Mor बहुत बहुत शुभेच्छा आज्ञा मुई चक्रपाणी अपन सब भल थिबे संबलपुरिया सबुठु बढ़िया किंतु बरहमपुरिया परे okay, so let me start my talk and this is how this is about leadership and innovation and an ecosystem. Ecosystem is normally the relationship between different organisms. You can say that it's as good as environment, but it's exactly not the environment. Ecosystem has to be included with not only what is the physical environment around you or what you can create, but basically we have to react or interact between each of us to create the leadership. And innovation is something which all of us do. And when both the things get combined, we see that we can get miracles done. We are living in a very, extraordinary times now. A virus as small as 1 billionth or 1 billionth of a millionth of nanometers, or around 125 nanometers, I think, has kept all of this powerful human race indoors. But then, did it really stop us from interacting, or did it stop us from having the ecosystem that we have? No, it could not, because you are still interacting. So somebody there a few years back has devised and had a vision that how do people interact without really meeting each other. So this started as a beautiful example of innovation and a vision, which was not really destined to be coming through a virus in the future, but it was invented with a precondition, or maybe with an idea that we can interact with each other without really putting a cost to the environment in terms of travel or money or your time. So this is how this web-based interactions happen, and today that's how we are interacting. Each of us is an innovator. The way we dress, the way we speak, the way our mothers have been cooking at home. When there are some ingredients, when there are no ingredients, mother invents, or nowadays fathers and everybody cooks. Now that we are indoors, the fathers are more into cleaning the houses, and mothers may be into cooking. And whenever there are no ingredients, we do try to innovate by putting some other ingredient. So innovation is in our blood. Not only you and me, but all the animals, all the creatures that are there on the earth, including all the plants. You see that they have been constantly innovating things. And leadership is one, which is he or she is the one which leads it. So do we really need a position or chair to be a leader? Definitely no. Because we are a leader in ourselves, as long as we are able to make the small good changes around us, the perceptible changes that will be good for people around us. So leadership is that which is for the betterment. You cannot annihilate people or races and still call yourself as a leader. It doesn't happen. It has to lead us to something which is good. So innovation and leadership, all of us. So let us start from there. So I will take a few, examples from the history, and from some small, I'm very fond of reading autobiographies. So from the history of science, I can take you through some of these examples and probably try to impress upon you what qualities that a leader should have, and how innovations can really transform into innovative capital or wealth generation, which is very important. Nowadays, we need to be innovative, and that is not sufficient. We have to generate wealth from there. This is where the countries progress. The country which has got the highest amounts of innovations is the country that is rich. So we should not fall back on that and try to lose it. So in every kind of innovation and leadership, there has to be a national feeling, whether it is Indian, whether it is Japanese, whether it is American. We have to make our own innovations, and we have to put our country first. So this is how the leadership and innovations go. And let me start with an example of Henry Tesla. This is during 1850s. He was a Serbian, and one of the greatest innovators during his time. He had 300 plus innovations to his credit, and some of the important ones are he tried the motor without wires, and he tried to create AC generators. He had wireless communication technology, and this all happened during the 1850s. And he started from rags. He went to rich. He became super rich. Then he came back to all the way to a pauper. And when he died, he had nothing to behind him as property or wealth. And Henry Tesla, of course, is very highly respected scientist. The unit of magnetic flux is named after him, and there is probably an airport in Belgium in his honor. So that's it. On the other hand, compare it with Thomas Alva Edison. All of us have studied about Thomas Alva Edison in our schools. And Edison is not a trained scientist or engineer. When he was a very, mentally he was impaired. And when he came from a very poor family. And he and his family had to survive on the newspaper that he used to sell on the local trains. And he used to go to school after that. He was and he would do all kinds of crazy things in school because from childhood he was into innovative things. So one of those examples is, he would try to take his friend and then put a cycle pump into his mouth, and he was filling air and thinking that he will become like a balloon and he will start going up. So these were the things that he was doing. And the school had a huge problem of, maintaining his education and his education standard. So he was chucked out from the school, and the school principal gives a letter to deliver to his mother through him. And the mother opens the envelope in which it was written that your child is mentally impaired, the school is not good to educate him, so he is rusticated. But the mother takes out the, when he asks her to read what is written in the letter, he says, son, the school says you are too good a genius, and the school is not properly equipped with teachers who can really teach you to that level. So they asked me to homeschool you. So a minor bit of encouragement and motivation to the child gave rise to what Thomas Alva Edison is. And what did he do? He invented everything. He was doing some innovations that were due to his own creations. Some he tried to improvise. Some came by chance while he is a tinkerer basically. And that is how the tinkering labs in India now have come up. We call them as Atal Tinkering Labs, and all IITs and IISc and other engineering colleges have, which unfortunately the universities are not there, or still we probably did not ask. So this was about the tinkering. Tinkering is not about inventing a machine. Tinkering can be with the ideas. It can be in social science, it can be in economics, it can be in anthropology, it can be in many, otherwise not a product design act. So Thomas Alva Edison had many, many things. I mean, his story is excellent example of any student, those who want to know about science and how the history of science developed. There is so much to be learned from the past of these people. He had invented so many things, and much before anybody could think of Harvard or Rockefeller or such universities, he had a park of his own, which is called as the Wizard of Menlo Park. It's in Louisiana, and it's about 10,000 acres. And he had huge amount of industries, and he would put people and ask them to just tinker with whatever they have ideas. And he invented so many which are patented today. So during one of the times, the park got torched. I mean, it got fire. So all his earnings or all his instruments that were there, all was burning in front of him. And he was watching it. Then he calls his son and he says, please call your mother and ask her to watch the spectacle of the fire. That is, he was not really upset that his creation is getting destroyed by the fire, but he was a positive person. So what he did is, his thinking was that he used to say, I have learned from this how 10,000 items cannot be done. That means all the failures leads to a success. So all the failures that you go through that leads to the success are not really failures. Because of the failures, you did get the success. So here is what is positiveness. All the great leaders and all the great innovators, they grow through the difficulty. They just don't go through it. You have to grow. You have to take every, the challenge that comes is a learning process. The more difficult it is, the more better teacher it is. So that is how an innovator and a leader is distinguished. And here is to compare, because I started with Henry Tesla, and also since I was talking about Thomas Alva Edison, both of them were contemporaries, maybe separated by 4 years. Thomas Alva Edison, what Thomas Alva Edison had that Henry Tesla did not have, that is called as innovative capital. So the innovations that Tesla invented could not be turned into capital, whereas Thomas Alva Edison was a great, he turned all his innovations into great capitals. And who benefits from the capital is the state, is the nation, and that continues for good. So a leader needs to be innovative capital is always essential for a leader to be distinguished. So leadership is innovation and trying to educate it. And this is where innovation network or the leader that one is should be having a great innovative network. So for any organization, it is not just enough to have a leader and there are followers. No, there has to be a central leader. There has to be a group of leaders who should have a collaborative mindset, and the whole team works like allies of the company. They're all the partners of the company, even from the smallest to the biggest. Everybody should look and work for the company with the innovativeness that it is there. So in every of these meetings, we should be setting a performance matrix and try to achieve those performance into productive designs. And these designs, as I keep on telling, it's not only, unfortunately in our country, it has got, innovation when it comes, we always feel that innovation is about a product. You have to invent a machine or you have to invent some medicine. No, it doesn't have to be. It has to be ideas. The germination of idea is more important. And that has to be translated into the innovative product. It can be anywhere or it can be applied to anything. So the innovation networks involves connect. We have to set a boundary and engage, support and govern. And we have to not only complete it there, we have to manage it and track it. So there are, behind every great innovator, there has to be a great innovative network. So we have to start. It is high time that the university cultures should have this innovative culture. All of our PhD theses, all of our dissertations that need to be innovatively. The repeat production of the same work doesn't lead us anywhere. If I reinvent the wheel 1,000 times, it doesn't make me any better. I have to have something new that has to be there. And each of these theses should be, there should be a IPR unit in each university, which should be vetting this project or the title, and then it should be, IPR should lead to some kind of a innovation. So the PhD topic should also be chosen in some way, so that it is leading to innovation. And the leader there is the teacher. And the leader there is the lab assistant. And the leader there is the whole university should be working together to make it into a leadership and innovative culture into this. Let me give you a few examples from the corporate world. Jeff Bezos, Amazon, he would always put in his board meetings, one chair will be always empty, and that he puts, there will be just a board telling that it is a customer. So for Bezos, it is a customer who is the most important person. For us, it is our students who is the most important customer for us. And it is for us, for some others like, Pete Mesab, I think it is from Mesable, Pete Casmore, almost 5.5 billion papers are downloaded each year. He's only 25 years old. And he always feels that there has to be a follow-through for any kind of innovation. If I have an idea and I'm not following it up, I can say that, I can innovate. But what good is it if it is not well documented and it is not coming to the final product? So who is helping us in this? There has to be an IPR unit which will take us through the innovative process. And the idea should be generated into a full form body after the combination or innovative teamwork or network that is there. This is how he used to do. Mark Zuckerberg, in the Facebook, he would always feel that passion is more important than skill. Skill one can always be taught, but passion comes from your own, it comes from your within, what you like. And that passion should be translated into what work I do. So he always, he may prefer a ballet dancer or an Odissi dancer to somebody who is a good coder. So he feels that I can always teach a coder. I can always teach because this person is so passionate about his dancing or his singing or whatever he or she wants, then I can always train them to be what I want them to be. So passion is necessary. So we have to inculcate that passion among our students and among our colleagues to deliver to the product. If we simply go by the numbers and if we simply calculate that, okay, everything that is counted really doesn't count, and everything that is counted is of not much use. We keep on counting how many. It doesn't lead to anywhere if there is no big quality. If it's better to have one rather than having 10 unnecessary things done. So we have to have this passion for our work, and the passion should be created within our students and our research group, and which should take them towards the end goal. And if they are passionate, they will not be really worried about grades, or they will not be worried about, tomorrow the grades become just a piece of paper. If they are innovative, if they have passion in their minds, then they can go anywhere and sell their ideas. So the skill development is so important here when the skill is associated with the passion that is there with the person. So we need to create that passion among the students. So how do we create passion? Passion cannot be taught like in a classroom, but we have to find out what is his or her passion, and we have to give him or her a topic, or give him or her that department where he wants to work. So here we have got so much compartmentalized between history, between economics, between zoology, between chemistry. If you're a chemist, you cannot do anything in history. If you're in history, then you cannot do anything in physics. No, it is high time we all break those shackles, we come out of the chains and make it into an innovative capital of networking of events and ideas. Okay, let us now take General Motors. You might all have seen that in newspapers. Mary Barra, a young CEO of General Motors, she recalled about 1 million Ford vehicles just because there was an ignition problem in the engine. So this is to show that we can always make a course correction. The loss is not important, but the face of the organization is important. So it is always essential that you be honest in what you are doing, and don't look at whether if I change my, if I have done something and it is not coming good, and then I somehow manage to do it and I produce the result in the form of a dissertation, it's not going to work in the long way. The student will get a degree, but we have to be honest, and we have to be passionate, and we have to be generating ideas. So this moral leadership, it outlines in a vision that is rooted in universal aspirations, universal acceptance, and universal principles and the values. Without values, without morality, without principles, we will be there somewhere, but will not be there where we like to be there. Please do remember, I don't know whether you can see it, I cannot see myself here now, but this is a pyramid, and this is only stable when the base is so large and flat. And when I invert it, it will never be stable. So we have to have this vertical thinking, but we have to have this horizontal base. Never forget the networking that is there in any kind of startup work that is there. We have to always have a tangential thinking. The thinking cannot be horizontal. Horizontal thinking and vertical networking will lead to a disaster. So you should always have a horizontal networking followed by a tangential thinking. That is where it will put us ahead of many of the innovators or many of the routine innovators that are there. So this is how we have to start our product. And in the process, let us go back to, let me give some example of some of our favorite cricketers. All of you are very fond of Virendra Sehwag, and the person who hits a 6 to complete his triple century. I mean, think about it. Somebody on 294 will hit maybe several ducks. He will do several dot balls. He will have singles, several 6 singles in it. So he will take about 100 balls to complete one's triple century. But here is a person who hits a 6 to get his century. So how did he start there? He was not always like that there. He was a number 4 batsman, and it was his leader, Saurav Ganguly. And he was a very big failure at number 4. Saurav Ganguly backed him, took him to the top slot. He said, Virendra, you have to go to open the innings and be there. And nobody wants to face a new bowler, and especially when you have people like, the West Indian fast bowlers or the Australian fast bowlers bowling at you at such speed. And Virendra Sehwag said, no, I cannot open. It's going to be too dangerous for my career. But then the leader comes and says, no matter what, I'll support you till the end. And that is where you have Virendra Sehwag. So he scored century after century. He was one of the, very exciting batsmen to watch. So the support of the leader. So the leader needs to be supporting his staff. He needs to be really, really supporting all his staff or all his teammates in such a way that they're motivated and they're taken to their full potential without being really, you should take pride in, the leader should always take pride in his team. If a team member performs, the leader should really not shy away from giving the credit to them. The leader should be taking maybe everything of the failure and nothing of the credit. In 1986, I remember I was in my university. I was in IIT, and that's the time when rocket science was going big. It still is in India. And at the time, President Abdul Kalam, the people's president and one of the greatest scientists in the humanist that India has ever had, and he was in charge of a project and of a space project which failed. So the rocket comes down onto the sea. And Professor Satish Dhawan, who was the then chairman of ISRO, when the press conference comes, Abdul Kalam was all scared because he has to face this aggressive press. And at that time, the chairman comes and takes the press meet, and he puts Kalam aside. He says, "No, Kalam, I will take the press meet. I will face the brickbats." And after 1 year, the same project becomes successful. And when Kalam says his chairman, Professor Dhawan, to take the press conference, then Professor Dhawan, as a leader, he says, "No, now you should take the press conference. You should lead." So that is how leaders should behave. They should always be behind their team, and they should always push their team, and they should find the most successful, satisfaction when their team performs. They should not be worried about their own selfish goals or whether whether their name will be etched in the history or not. They should always be thinking about, as I said, about the project, about the system, about the country. So this leadership is basically a combination of vision, a great vision that should be there. There should be a lot of motivation to your team players. There should be a lot of servicing. Wherever you can do a good service to them, you can bring in this and that and make them in their comfort zones, put them in there. Show some empathy. There is no need to be too tough all the time. They also need empathy. Our team players need a lot of empathy. And we have to have a lot of creativity. So while working, while having board meetings, while we are having our own general meetings with faculty members or the students, we should always be trying to create that kind of creativity within us and also within the team. The risk cell will be there. We have to take risk. The creativity, the leadership, and the innovation will never come unless and until we take the risk. The ship is always very safe in the harbor, but it is not meant to be into the harbor itself. It has to go into the rough weather, and it has to venture into the weather, and it has to face the weather, but it should transport the goods, it should transport the people. So please do take risk. A leader or innovator need to take risk. Just one, I have seen many biology students. They will conduct experiments. They will not even sleep for months together to complete an experiment, and the experiment suddenly fails for whatever their design, or even for power failure or something or other. But then their whole thesis comes down and they're dejected. But it is not necessary that unless they take the risk, they cannot get another beautiful paper. Maybe if they have taken that risk, they will end up there. Or if they feel depressed, if they feel frustrated, they will end up in completing the job as it is. So risk is one of the important things. Edmund Hillary, I'm just remembering because I'm also a keen trekker, and unfortunately Professor Deepak Behra did not read my biodata that I sent him. I'm a geologist because I love to be with the nature. And so when you go to when you chance upon to visit Himalayas, or you already could have been there, just look at the Himalayas, the mightiness. It has been there for several million years, maybe 55 million years back. And the water, the mountain, the rocks. But see the beautiful creativity, the simplicity, and the complexity of the nature. So when Edmund Hillary, on May 29th, actually, it was the anniversary when he conquered the Mount Everest in 1953, along with Tenzing Norgay, he felt very relieved, And he also felt very surprised, relief, because the Mount Everest, the challenging Mount Everest, was conquered for the first time, and he was very surprised that a simple person like him, he is the son of a beekeeper from New Zealand, who could climb Mount Everest, and that taught him how humble the mountains are. And this beekeeper later becomes High Commissioner of New Zealand to India. So in his book, or Nothing Venture, Nothing Wins, he writes that unless and until you venture out, unless and until you venture, you will not win anything. That means you have to have a keen explorer's eyes. That is, our life itself is about exploration of things. If we don't, nature is beautifully imbibed. Everything is there. If we learned about the laws of physics, the laws of chemistry, or the laws of biology, then it was already there in nature. What we have just done is encrypted what was there in nature. We did not do anything new. The nature has always been there. And so that will make you humble, or the leader should always feel that, how small I am in front of all this, and why should I have the so-called ego or something that is there. So first, the leader first need to remove that thin skin or the thick skin of ego from him or her. And we have to be gender sensitive. If you are a leader, we need to be always gender sensitive. If the leader happens to be a man, if it's an woman, it's fine. The 50% of the world is women, and they should occupy naturally all the positions that according to their proportion. But it doesn't happen. But when the leader happens to be a man, he should be really gender sensitive, and there should not be any biasness towards the woman in terms of affinity bias should not be there. There should not be any unconscious biasness should be there. Nothing should be there. So it should be an equal opportunity. So gender biasness, unbiasedness should be created at all workplaces. And it is the role of the leader to see to it that it does happen. So this is how it tends to go into the things of making one organization a leader or a high-ranking institute, let's say, or in our case, or a high-ranking capital corporate in other cases. So this is very essential. And now that we are going from, we are in a century where digital pedagogy is taking a big shape now. We should not be we should not have, in this new pedagogy, we should not let out or leave out our creative intelligence, cognitive intelligence, spiritual intelligence, and make all our products, that is our students, highly competent, highly capable, and highly compassionate. So this is where academic leadership should really try. And what are the ecosystem that we have to provide? We have to provide a congenial atmosphere for them. They may be going wrong sometimes, but we have to have the patience to say that it is okay, you can be wrong, but you can always come to the right way, or maybe what did you learn from the wrong that has been done, and come back to this. So let us not focus only on studies and studies alone. There are other creative fields that are there, and we should have equal respect for sports, games, and arts, culture, everything that will be there. So I'll also talk about, when all of us were in schools, we have listened to this kind of Panchatantra stories from our mothers or grandmothers. And I'm always reminded of how beautifully the Panchatantra Pandit Vishnu Sharma had, he used to narrate, he used to give tips to the young prince in the Gurukul of how to lead a life. One of the very popular stories was a jackal. It gets into the village and falls into a blue dye pond, and then suddenly it becomes blue. So its color changes, although it cannot see itself because there was no mirror concept at that time, or the jackal wouldn't know what's a mirror. So it goes into the jungle and finds that all the jungle animals are all very respectful towards him. So everybody get sideways, and they were very scared, and so he keeps on walking, and even the lion comes out and prostrates in front of him, and all the food comes to him, and then the jackal is happy. He feels that there is something miracle that has happened because he was in the pond, and then he doesn't remove his skin out from there, and he behaves like he is a different animal. He now projects himself as different than a jackal. So he continues like that as a king of the jungle for about a week. And then one fine morning, the other jackals start howling. And being true to his jackalship, he also starts howling. Then everybody comes to know that he's a jackal, and they beat him up. So what he learned from there, or what Pandit Sharma was trying to tell there, is that never be artificial, be your original. Whatever you are, be your original. You have to be, you cannot pose as something, and you cannot project yourself as something which you are not, because that thin skin will always come out from us. And if you go into, there were three goats, one goat, a person who was carrying goat, three people come and they say one after another that why you are carrying a dog. The other person comes and says why you are carrying a dog. The other person also comes, why you are walking with the dog. And this fellow really thinks the goat is not a goat and it is a dog, and he leaves the goat away and leaves. So he was not confident. So we have to be confident of what we are. If perceptions and people tell something and we go by that, then we have to be self-confident about ourselves of what we are doing. So don't go by what others say. If you are convinced, if you have the firm conviction of thought, please go ahead and do it. This will be my advice to the young researchers that they are out there who will become tomorrow's leaders, that please be yourself, come, learn, be honest, be creative, be sincere, and have all the values that are there. But at the same time, please have some leadership qualities. If everybody is same, then who will take the lead? There has to be somebody who has to take the lead. And we should not doubt always that the leader has to be bad or the leader is imposed. No, leader is created from within us and it goes up. So this is very, very essential. There are three, according to Bhagavad Gita, all the creative thing, all the creations that we are, have three gunas of the cosmic energy. All of us pose three gunas, that is sattva, tamas, and rajas. So sattva is one which is always a positivity. Everybody has got a lot of positivity with them. All the good things, truthful, honest, sincere, hardworking, these are all sattva. Tamas is something which is negative, always being negative and lazy, ignorant, not trying to learn. And those who are learning, also you feel bad or become jealous. And Rajas is one which maintains the sattva and tamas. All of us have it. So this balancing act, so we have to bring the rajas to take our sattva higher up and bring our tamas down. Then only each of us will be a leader. Whoever leader you notice that they have all this rajas with them, or in the past they used to say that he's born with a lot of Raj Yoga and all. So this is nothing but rajas. This is what has been described in the, and a leader has to be first and last. He should not be selfishly oriented. He should, just take Buddha, a king, beautiful wife, and a recently born child. He leaves everything and he goes to find out what is enlightenment and how he can help the people at large. And he suffers throughout his life. And till he gets his enlightenment, he doesn't come back to his life, to his former life. And he never, in fact, took it. So leaders like Buddha, like Gandhi or Albert Einstein, or you take any football player like Pele, or everywhere there are leaders who have shown us the path of, how they have been different and how they started as ordinary human beings, but they could take themselves off and to become leader. And so we all have to inculcate that habit of leadership in us. We have to have that creativity in us. We have to now, so what education does this creativity, it passes it on to innovativeness. And in the universities, we should have this culture of IPRs and all the policies that are there, and make a place where students and teachers can meet, talk, exchange ideas, and that goes. So once in a week, probably we can have this kind of classes where we all come out of these boundaries and come down to the students level and try to interact, give our ideas to them. But it is better that we don't give our ideas. Let us listen to their ideas and encourage their ideas into what can be done for the future, for the betterment of the country and for the university. I have been given 40 minutes and I think I'm time. And I will take more questions. I would be happy to take questions. Is that fine, Professor Bera?
If you wish, you can continue for another 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay, yeah, great.
Okay.
Yeah. So I talked about the leadership. Yeah, let me give another example of our own. I mean, let us come back to our own state. There is a young boy who is about 17 years old. He goes to he's from a small village in Balangir, and he goes to Kota, which is the nerve center of coaching classes. And every now and then at 17 years, he had to come to Delhi to come to Odisha. And he had to stay in Gurgaon, the small hotels. And he wouldn't have much money, but sometimes he would have some money to stay to pass the night. And then he had to take the train. And this boy realizes that all these hotels are empty. They are not being chartered out to people. But at the same time, they don't reduce their amounts of their rates of stay, their rent. So he talks to one of these hotels where he used to frequently stay, and he says, can we have this partnership where I'll take your room, I will clean it up, and I will sell it to others. It will be your property, but I will sell it to customers at the rate that is good for us and a variable or graded rate. And half of it will go to you because anyway your rooms are going empty, and half of it will come to me. And here, this is a 19-year-old boy from Odisha. And then he creates a big venture now, what is known as OYO, right? Own your own. And today he has 1 million, remind you, he has 1 million rooms all over the world, worth about $5 billion. And he is hardly 26 years old. His name is Ritesh Agrawal. There is no capital, there is nothing. And he was only 19-year-old boy. And that is how he created his innovative idea into wealth. So what did the wealth do to him? Did he become a rich man who lives in the yacht or he lives in another planet? No. He, in turn, gave rise to jobs to about 10,000 people. So that is how the innovative ideas can be turned into property or wealth creation, which the nation now, the Make in India that we are talking of is nothing but that. And here again, in 1984, 7 of the young people from IITs and IIT Bombay, I think, and Narayan Murthy from IIT Kanpur, Nandan Nilekani, all of them were sitting in 1984 in a small room in Pune, and including Sudha Murthy, who was the only earning member who had the job, and all these rest of the 6 guys had no job. And they were thinking of floating a company. So when they were discussing of what they should start, what should be the motto of the company, so somebody says that we should have a company which should have a worldwide reach. Then somebody says that we should create wealth in such a way that we'll be one of the richest. So all this happened, and then Narayan Murthy comes, no, we should start a company which will earn the respect of everybody. So a company, if it is made, if it earns the respect, if you are honest in making the company, if you are, you are doing it for the good of the people, then they will have a long run and they will sustain for long, and not the companies which start with a motivation of just making money for the time being. So leadership, wealth, the knowledge that goes along with that will all be, creativity. Studies give rise to thinking, and thinking gives rise to creativity. Creativity gives rise to resources. Resources give rise to wealth, and wealth gives rise to, again, creativity. So there are companies where innovative wings are there. So where is that in the public universities in India? And do you think that there are no ideas here, or do you think that we lack in anything else just because it's a public university, or the students are not coming from so well off, the so-called, but they are highly talented. If you go into the tribal areas, just look at the song Rangavati. It has become a craze everywhere, even till today, after about 40, 50 years of its, the song by the great Gauntia Saab. And where is the innovative capital he made? I don't know whether Gontia Saab got a Padma Shri, but whether he's a rich man. So that has not been converted into richness or created wealth in spite of his great talent, because there is a platform lacking which was not there at that time to make him or her a creative person into that. When I am in Barampur, I see that Koraput, Fulbani and Ganjam and all these are filled with all these districts, and the people that our students are extremely creative. But there is a lack of a platform, and who is going to provide that platform? It's people like you and me who have to provide the platform. And why can't we provide it independently or autonomously? I mean, we have to have that freedom to create a individual hub of ideas. And there are cafes nowadays called as idea cafes. There are institutes in IITs where they call it as idea cafes. You just go there, you'll be served free tea, coffee, and students just keep on chatting. And suddenly somebody gets an idea, he or she gets into his room and they start a Zomato company or some giant panda or some such company that starts from a small hostel room in IITs, and suddenly they are onto the market. Like Flipkart, you might all be aware that how it started from a small room of a grad student. So why the universities are not able to provide this platform? And when we'll be realizing that it is important and the talent is not being harnessed as it should have been, and where are our people? Where is the humanities engineering or engineering in humanities? Are we not trying to link up them at some point or another? Why can't I know why can't I study history, for example, with mechanical engineering? Why can't I study physics along with Odissi dance? So when we'll make all this also a credit-worthy course, and why should we not bring it all onto our platform? And Odisha is so rich in all this, and sometimes it is quite disappointing to see that we are not able to do what we really want to do. But that platform of development, not that every skill has to yield me money, but we may lose this talent forever if we don't encourage. And the leadership is required to take. I'm not talking about the leadership of the vice chancellors. The leadership, I'm not talking about the state or the country. I'm talking about the leadership coming out from this very talent pool that is there. Why can't they come up and ask, this is what we want to do, can you support us? Yes, we are always there to support. So this should all be inculcated in what we really want to bring in and create that ecosystem of congenial atmosphere. When somebody comes to me, for example, with some idea, I'll say that it is not part of your course, you cannot take it because this is what is written here. So where is that flexibility when it will come, so that all the Indian students can have this flexibility of pursuing what they want? But there will be people who would like to pursue what they're doing because that career is also important. But that talent pool, we should not lose it just because we have some rules. I don't call it as rigid, but we have some rules. We have to follow the guidelines. So it is high time we get into those stuff. So thank you very much, Professor Deepak Bera. It's a pleasure to speak to all of you. I cannot see you, but I just could not see anybody. I really would like to interact with you, but I'd also like to come once in person to speak, maybe once this pandemic is over. And be safe, be healthy, and let's now interact. I'm free. The floor is free. I think you can ask questions.
Thank you very much, Professor Chakrapani. And we all enjoyed your, motivational speech, I would say. I'm sure, especially the research scholar and entry-level assistant professor must have enjoyed your lecture, must have felt motivated, and rightly said, a leader is one who is ready to face any kind of challenges, who is ready to accept mistake, and who is a quick learner and who learns from his or her mistake. I'm seeing Professor Isan Patra. He said yesterday, leader is one who is ahead of his time, quote unquote, Isan Patra. And I think we have many questions. If I just, keep on, the participant will not get opportunity to speak. And I request Professor Mahapatra to give to summarize within 2-3 minutes and start putting all those questions that we have received meanwhile from our participant. Professor Mahapatra.
Good afternoon, sir. And we are very happy that you gave a very useful talk, which is anecdotal and full of insights And your talk was very engaging because you gave many examples. And you began with this right note that adversity perhaps is the mother of invention, as the adage goes. And you went on talking about the examples of Nikola Tesla and Thomas Alva Edison. There are in fact many others like John Bard, Michael Faraday, and Dale Carnegie. In fact, many more examples. But then you did talk about how positive mindset is necessary, and how we all are, in fact, particularly Indians, are so good at tweaking and tinkering, and therefore there is perhaps in our blood a bit of every Indian probably has the innovator in his blood, and very rightly you said that all of us are innovators, and you went on to talk about the pyramidal startup structure. Then second part of your lecture was on leadership, and you very rightly said that a leader is someone who must take risk. A leader ought to have the quality of empathy. The leader should give full credit to the team members for success, just as he or she should take full responsibility for any failure. And the leader ought to be very humble. He or she should be free from any kind of prejudice and should be gender neutral. Then very rightly, and towards the end of your talk, you said, be yourself, and you ought to be selfless. And then you talked about how necessary it is for giving a platform to our students for leadership, like the IITs have been doing. Our academic system is very rigid, but we need to make it a little more flexible. Thank you very much, sir. And your talk has generated quite a few questions, and we would take up these questions, and the others can also chip in if they wish to. The first question is, we know a true leader is he who actually fosters future leaders. Don't you think that we are missing that process in the Indian academia?
The first duty of the academician to fulfill his primary duty of, why the student has come. So that having done that duty, he takes you to the next level of what's your interest, what's your passion. He or she should give you some, 1 hour just time once in a week. Students can meet the teacher. They're of course meeting them every now and then find out what is lacking in him or her, a personal care that will be there, and follow it up with leading him or her into her passion. And suppose I'm studying some subject and I am weak in one portion of that subject, but could be stronger in another portion. So maybe I can be, given more inputs in the other subject in the other portion of the subject in which I have more interest than this person. So that is called as, what we have missed. We always keep on talking about this blended education. So here the flipped classrooms will come into picture. And the flipped classroom is one where students learn from each other. You expose them, you put them in a round table, 7 or 8 of them sit there, you give them the materials and ask them to learn from each other after discussion for 1 hour and come out with the answer. So this is how it should be taken. And your primary question was that, are we failing? You asked, are we failing in giving that academicians are failing in giving the leadership? So leadership is not to be taught. Leadership comes, actually, you'll see that suddenly in a group, somebody has taken the leadership. In cricket, the leadership comes if you own the ball and bat. That's how it starts. But once a good player comes out from there, he takes over. Although you became the captain because it was your bat and ball first, but the player who played well becomes the leader. So this is how leadership will take over. I don't know whether I got your question right.
No, just a minute. I would like to pitch in. And I mean, do you mean to say that all leaders are innovators and all innovators are good leaders? And
No.
if that is true, then how do you differentiate a leader from an innovator?
No, I did not say that. Actually, in all the talk, I impressed upon that the innovator, you are an innovator, but I am not. So in that case, I have to encourage. I am the leader, but I am not an innovator. But I have to encourage the innovativeness of my team. So, and also I have to take the pride in my team. To give a small example, Subramanian Chandrasekhar, who got his Nobel Prize in 1984 in astrophysics for finding out the black hole research, I think he did. And he got a Nobel Prize in 1984. And his whole class got Nobel Prize in 1975. So he used to take a lot of pride in telling in the class that, my whole students class, my class of whole students got Nobel Prize. The class had only 2 students, one Japanese and one American. So it was an elective course. He used to come for 200 kilometers driving to take the class, and they got a Nobel Prize in 75. And the teacher gets a Nobel Prize in 1984. And he knew that his work was probably much superior at that point of time. But he would be so proud. So this is where the leader and innovator. So if the leader is an innovator, there is nothing like that, because he has to be innovative, and constant innovation is needed. If you have looked at the corporate sector, I'm not talking about the leadership in academia now. If you look at the corporate, they constantly innovate. There is an innovative wing for them. And every day in the meetings, there will be talk of what are the targets and what are the innovation that you're doing. What are the other fellows doing? So this, they talk in terms of their commercial aspect of the company. But here comes the intellectual capital, the universities where the education is there. So this is where the difference, and this is where the leader can encourage the innovator. So definitely the leader need not be both. Better if the leader is highly academic, a top-class researcher, and a motivator. So that the beginning should be from there.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Now we have many questions, and I request Professor Mahapatra to raise those questions.
Yeah, here is a question from Professor Atanupati. And what is the concept of incremental innovation, and how does this compare with other types of innovation, sir?
Yeah, okay. This is a good question. Incremental innovation is all innovation do not lead to a complete end goal at the same time. I'm doing my innovations for keeping something in mind, but in the process I find some bottlenecks, and I found that the theory that was theorized was not correct. So I went ahead and then I changed my course. Then I went into that. So this is what called as innovation, which comes from by chance, and innovation from innovations. You are trying for something and ending up with another. So this is how it goes. Innovation cannot be a target-oriented innovation. The idea of a student, for example, to study should not be to get a job. The idea of studying is to have knowledge. Knowledge will lead to a job. So that is what is the incremental. We can, you can connect it into the incremental innovations. So it goes step by step, and that is where the offshoots do derive. And that may lead to another innovation. In fact, in biology, it happens very often. In chemistry, it happens very often when you are working on molecules.
So there's one more question. Is there any difference between a leader and an entrepreneur?
A leader is not definitely an entrepreneur. He doesn't make money out of leadership. Entrepreneur is one who makes economy out of it. Here is an economist, right? He is making money. He's an entrepreneur. He's a businessman.
Okay, sir, my question is, sir, what we have seen is that those are actually innovators, young innovators in universities and institutes. Many of them actually, what we find them, I have seen in IIT, also in universities, they don't score good CGPA and other things, okay? They are so passionate about things, they actually, they don't do good in formal degree, whatever hours them degree, and subsequently they actually suffer. In IIT, that does not happen actually, because they somehow good students go through things, but in universities I find them, they don't do well, and sometimes they get failed and other things. Is there any sort of way we can compensate or incentivize those efforts and other things so that they go through this formal degrees and other things successfully?
Actually, it is wrong to say that in IITs they are good students and they're innovating. Actually, they are 5-pointers. It is called as 5-pointer. And if you have seen Chetan Bhagat's book, 5-point something, he was a 5-pointer, but see the success where he is. He's IIT grad, IIM, and also a successful writer, and having $100 million of business. So it is not necessary. CGPA has nothing to do with innovation or ideas. The
That's right,
ideas,
that's right.
absolutely, it is not. So, but in university, we focus on the CGPA, we focus on whether you're getting a first class or not, whether you're topping the class or not. We encourage him or her who is doing well in academics. But this is where I talk that we now have to start looking at the university as a hub for these kind of students who have more passion for something else, but they are also here to get another degree. So now what UGC has done, and the minister has recently announced, you might have seen, that you can get your regular degree at the same time you can get a skilled degree from the open universities. So it is in the priority, it is in the top agenda of the government. All the time they keep on talking about, because if you look at 5G, Huawei, when you buy after 5G comes, after, Huawei, the Canadian Chinese who owns it, if you buy a mobile phone of 10,000 rupees, 5,000 goes straight to Huawei company because he owns the IPR for 5G. So that is the amount of, we lost our resources completely. So that is the big problem now. No country in the world wants to go for 5G. That has been delayed because of this. So that kind of capital comes from there. So coming back to your question, sir, that they sometimes may fall back in class, but we need to encourage, and we have to give individual attention.
How to encourage?
Encourage by talking to them. By talking to them, sir. That is why we are teachers. I think we are there just to, we have to make the better the best, and the, bad to good, good to better. And if we are making the better only better and the best is always best, then we are not doing our job sincerely. We have to take all those in the class and make them better, not only in academics, but across the, the spectrum that is there. So it is, I mean, some device, all the universities in Odisha from UGC, we have innovative centers, right? So if you look at the innovative centers, their output and in what way it has been ideated and who are all involved, it is mostly science and technology. But where are the humanities? Where is the ideas of humanities coming, and where it is getting documented, or where it is getting the IPR rights? So that has to be there. So we have to probably.
Universities, you don't have that. Though universities, you don't have this innovation.
We have innovative centers. We have centers.
Have some pen and paper, but then
no. We have in physical structure also. We have money also. No. Actually, the government has been pretty good in that. But then education is ours, and how, as a leader, how I am trying to get things out of it is my problem. The government cannot come out with everything. They can give you the resource at the best, and after that, it is us to implement it. And as teachers, all of us also have a role to play.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. And there are other questions as well. And Professor Mahapatra, would you kindly ask?
I think I have to combine those questions, take out the main points. Well, many questions that talk about the possibility, in fact, these questions are about the possibility of opening up such innovative innovation centers in government colleges and state universities, number one. Number two, is it also possible to open an interdisciplinary center for science policy in a university? These are a couple of questions. And perhaps related to it is the third question: how can the innovation or the idea of innovation be translated into reality when we have very little GDP allocation for higher education, which is less than 1%, and we compare very, very poorly with all other countries, particularly China? So these are the three questions.
These are very good questions, sir. The first one is, we have to connect it. Interdisciplinary research is already there. Interdisciplinary centers are also there. And we cannot probably at the present time in the state of Odisha, we may not be able to open some new departments, but there is no way that nobody has said that you cannot have interdisciplinary research. I mean, this collaboration is the word now. You look at any publication that comes, there are authors more than 10, 15. In science, there was a paper which had got 300 plus authors, and each of them had contributed in some way. So it has to be written that what was your contribution. You cannot just have names. So interdisciplinary research is how it is in our mind. We can always open up our mind and take the interdisciplinary research. Second thing, coming back to this, if as a university, if we are not able to help our neighboring villages in terms of, you know, the computer-aided courses that we are talking of, or what people talk in general nowadays in terms of making the villages as villages, right? There should also be computer, you know, otherwise there will be a great divide in education, the online education that is there. So we have to contribute to the neighborhood villages. I'm talking about the villages to be converted into villages, and where this education partly coming from the directly teaching and coming from online, and the knowledge that comes to the agriculturist. You know, the IMD, you might have seen, have done this wonderful job of having centers everywhere, every village. And now they also predict when the fishermen can go into the sea or not, when you had to, you know, put your crop, when you had to cut it. And this kind of societally useful research also should play a role into that. So these two things, interdisciplinary research is already there, and it can be encouraged as and when, you know, people are doing interdisciplinary research. When it comes from, suppose, you know, a university wants to do another research with another university in USA or UK, we immediately jump into that and say that let's have an MOU. But why can't we have the same with a smaller so-called university or a college and have an interdisciplinary research? So this mindset has to change. Interdisciplinary is in our mind. We should not work anymore in silos. We have to go beyond our comfort zones or the boxes that have been built already around us. So this is, and take the knowledge from the traditional knowledge, so much of traditional knowledge that is available. And is it really documented, or are we really taking up anything from there? A few years back, a Chinese won a Nobel Prize based on their herbal, you know, medicine. And here is a history of herbal medicine for thousands of years. And where is it gone? Our biotechnologists are all working on that, and it can be translated. And that traditional knowledge should come back to us now again in terms of science and in terms of the intellectual property that is there. But if we look at the doctor who is a, you know, we call them as a village quack, with a kind of suspicion, then it will not work. We have to have the trust, and maybe we can encourage them. You know, we should not only try to encourage or motivate the people who come to the university by, you know, wearing those modern clothes, but we can always invite our, you know, brothers and sisters from other non-traditional or non-educative class as well to come up.
Course of your talk that leaders emerge from people. They do not depend on people. Now, having said that, how would you take this statement that leadership quality is also inborn as much as innovativeness? How do you respond to this question?
Yeah, okay. So let us just take the simple example, Mahatma Gandhi, right? He is a classic example of a mass leader. What did he have with him? He had that simplicity and a purpose with him, and the honesty of that purpose. And he was made out a leader, but the leadership was with him to, you know, connect all the people with him. So what did he do? He came out from jacket and three-piece suits. He came down to khadi, and just, he was called as a half naked anyway. And he, you know, that is how he connected. So that is his leadership quality, that I will be among the masses, and the masses had that confidence in that he can lead us. So this is where he converted himself from being a very simple human being like any of us into a leader, which people chose him as a leader. And there was no such thing as a leader which they have to elect him as a leader. He became a leader on his own right. I mean, he never claimed that he's a leader, and people respected him as a leader. That's it. So that's how it comes.
Thank you, sir. And perhaps the last question. Can innovation in micro enterprises be helpful in marching towards sustainable ecological balance?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, why about why only innovations in small sectors? I mean, everywhere, everybody contributes. If a small, scale industry, if there are 1,000 small scale industry, it is equal to a 1 mega industry. So everybody is a polluter in here, if it is taken it in that sense. But everybody is also a creator of wealth. So we have to balance between these two. So when we balance between these two, we see that there has to be environmental consciousness should come in there, definitely. Without having without having the environmental thing in the back of our minds. And I'm so thankful that you asked this question, or whoever asked this question. Just on June 5th, I think 3 days after, on the third day from today, we'll have the World Environment Day, and see how the environment, we could not just stop the pollution from happening from all our industries that they worked, and the air pollution becomes so rampant, the vehicular pollution becomes so rampant, and just see a small microbe stopped all the industries, and you can now see the Himalayas, or you can see from Delhi, you can see the Himalayas, or from your home in Sambalpur, you can see some other mountain maybe which was not visible earlier. So why cannot all of us be a part of this and the environmental conservation? And why do we only take the industries or the entrepreneurs to protect the environment? It is the duty of each and every citizen to take the environment. It is a primary duty. We are studying it, but how much we are following it are two different things. So the balance or sustainably, ecological sustainable development goals are there of internationally, but how much we are targeting that and following it is a different matter. But we should have an ecologically sustainable economic development as well. So economy is also very important. It is essentially economy that drives the present earth, at least, and we cannot back out from there. We cannot be just keeping, tomorrow I cannot also at the same time think of saving the butterflies if my children are dying of diarrhea or malaria. So I can think of saving the butterfly only when my stomach is filled. So both the things have to go simultaneously. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Professor Chakrapani. And I think our Honorable Vice Chancellor would like to put you some question. Professor Patra, do you have any question?
No questions. It's a very interesting lecture, and not many things have been discussed anyway. I personally do not believe that anybody is born with innovative ideas and born with leadership qualities. It's the environment in which the student grows, or the person, individual grows, makes him that. If the person is capable of drawing innovation out of something, he will innovate. If he doesn't want to do anything, he cannot do it. So this is a inherent quality of the environment in which he is brought up. I've got a small note here that there's a great difference in the environment of an institution like an IIT or an engineering institute than an academic institute like Berhampur University or Ravenshaw University. Basically, the entire environment is not being made like that. The talk is not there in the town that innovation and entrepreneurship and all these things should be given priority. So what is happening is we are more into academics. We talk about getting degrees and go away. We have to create an environment where everybody starts thinking of innovation, starts thinking of entrepreneurship. Everybody should start. Like we have got one small unit where they train people to make freshwater pearl. You can do it even at home. They call, the train, and the trainers get trained and go away. But none of the students in the campus come up to learn this and do something different than what people are doing. That is exactly.
Yeah, sir, let me answer. Yes, can I answer, Professor Bera? 1 minute only.
Yeah.
See,
you please answer.
In Berhampur University, I mean, in Berhampur town, there is an institute called as ITI, Industrial Technological Training Institute, ITI, Industrial Training Institute. Wonderful innovations. I think the innovation that come out from there, I can challenge that IITs do not have. IIT have got huge research parks. Nowadays, it is a mandatory thing to have research parks where innovations are part of the culture of the students. But small ideas, like ITIs. I mean, they did not have much money, but they had beautiful ideas. They have also built a tunnel for coronavirus, this sanitizing. So this has come from these very students, and a principal who is probably one of the best. I have so much respect for him, and he could motivate them. And secondly, coming back to Jugaad, since you have worked in North, and this Haryana Jugaad culture, and when it started, there is a Jugaad is a vehicle, and it is run by the motor that was lying. One sick farmer, he was there was no rain, and he was just looking at the motor pump that was there in his farmland, and suddenly he thought, so anyway, I cannot do anything with this motor. Let us try to make it into a vehicle, and he made a vehicle, and that is now like a huge success. And that is the first word. The word Jugaad was used, and Jugaad is happening in us at every time. As educated mass, maybe we are not using it as frequently or we want to, but if you look at where the idea is there at every place, and that
Exactly.
idea you
If
and
I
me have
interrupt,
to bring.
Kripani,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
That's what I'm saying. That educated. See, I am a student from Kurukshetra University. Kurukshetra University has the engineering college, and the university have got one boundary. But innovation occurs in the engineering college, but innovation does not occur in the university campus. So that is what I said. ITI can do it, but in the same city, other educational institutes do not have that environment to compel the students to start thinking of entrepreneurship, or that has to come. Some
Yeah.
participant asked this question and made a long note, perhaps a student. See, we are not just talking about it. We also want you to come up and do it. Only thing is that, like you said, some student has to come together to do it. They see good movies, and in Netflix there is a series now on which the three boys have been trying to do their startup the way they have been growing. So you have got to learn from everything. Your
Yes.
college canteen could be a very good source of creating innovators and creating entrepreneurs. But thing is that the canteen room should have that environment to call people together to do it.
Right.
One person starts,
I,
then everybody comes.
I slightly differ from you, Professor Patro. Do you mean to say that you have to have some standards or some knowledge to be an innovator?
No.
But
No,
see,
I don't
Professor
say-
Chakrapani, what he said, just give me a minute. Professor Chakrapani rightly said, even it can happen with a farmer without formal education. So many times we have a misconception that innovation would happen in a place of learning like university, college. That may happen even
Exactly.
with,
Exactly.
yeah.
The Jugaad in Haryana is made by farmers who cannot speak one English sentence. But the same Jugaad is not happening in the university. That is what I'm saying. You don't need to have an academic institution to do that. There is not a big institution required. What is required is a set of people who start thinking together that they have to do something different than what everybody else is doing.
Yes, sir.
The
Just
moment
to add
somebody-
it, sir, just to add it, the Jugaad comes from there. We have to repackage it and
Yeah,
sell it. We have
that's
to
it.
make wealth out of the Jugaad.
That's
That is the idea of
That's it.
having the research
That
park
is
or
it. That's it.
entrepreneurship
That's it.
park.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's, you are very correct.
If there are no other questions, then we end the session. And on behalf of Sambalpur University, sir, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks for,
My pleasure.
this wonderful, thought-provoking lecture. I'm sure many of the participants, especially the research assistant professor, they must have been benefited quite a lot, and they must have been motivated by your speech, and keep on doing that. And we'll definitely invite you to our university to deliver a lecture in our auditorium for the benefit of our students.
Thank you. It's
Thank you very
such a
much,
pleasure. Such a
and-
pleasure to listen, talk to you. Thank you very much.
And, thanks to all the participants for their
Yeah.
patience hearing. And we expect you tomorrow. And another lecture is coming up. Our Vice Chancellor, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Ramadevi University will deliver her lecture in a very interesting topic,